One of a leader's jobs is to clarify the win. You can track progress against a goal, but you celebrate a win. So during this season, I think it's important to ask, how do you win at NSO? Is it a win when we have lots of people show up at our events? Is it a win when our events are executed without a hitch? Is it a win when we find people coming to our first large group? Or what is the win at NSO? The fuzzier we are about what constitutes a win at NSO, the less likely we'll be able to lead in a way that accomplishes our mission. The fuzzier we are about how to win, the less likely we'll be able to point back to NSO as a success. So I think it's pretty crucial for us to figure out, how do you win at NSO? To win at NSO, you need three things. You need to spread the net wide, you need to scout the apostolic talent, and you need to stimulate the spiritually curious. And those are the three things I want to talk about in this short video over the next few minutes. The first one is spread the net wide. I'll never forget a conversation I had at Urbana 2006. We interacted with a missions organization that's doing fantastic work in difficult and closed countries all over the world. And they shared with us a question that they ask all of their North American ministry missions candidates. And the question that they ask is this. They say, if you imagine your first year on assignment in this difficult or closed country, and imagine that you have a choice. You can either build deep relationships with 6 people, or you can do an event that will put you in touch with and connect you to over 1,000 people. And remember, it's your first year. What do you do? Where do you invest in your first year? And they were telling us 90% of the North American missionaries that they get all say, oh, that's easy. You build deep relationships with 6 people. And the missions agency is careful to affirm, yes, building deep relationships is an important and critical part of ministry. But they point out that if they say this to them, they say, if you start building deep relationships before you've met and interacted with the thousands of people that are inevitably in your community, you will inevitably build relationships with the other people that are most like you. You'll build relationships with the other expatriates, or with people who are educated in the United States or Canada or maybe in Europe. And then they say this, you will miss out on the opportunities to build relationships with the very people who are the keys to seeing the gospel spread in the communities that you've been sent to serve. Now, what's true in closed countries is true for us on campus. Unless we stretch out our relational expectations far outside what we think is possible, we'll never discover the people who God has placed to be the keys of moving mission forward. And we will never find people who aren't just like the students we're already reaching in our groups. To win at NSO, you've got to spread the net really wide. Wider than we often think possible. That's how we win at NSO. We cast the net really, really wide. And, I know that this is true. I've seen it possible that even a small group of students committed to a vision of casting a wide net can interact with thousands and thousands of students to the glory of God. Now, the second thing you need to do, so it's a win when we cast the net wide, but the second way we win at NSO is when we scout the apostolic talent. Have you ever been to the Apple store and one of those people in the blue shirts comes up to you and they don't just ask you whether you like an Apple product, but they start to ask specific questions about what kind of iPad or iPhone or Apple Watch you're interested in. And if you're like me, that's the moment where you realize, oh, I haven't thought this through very clearly, and this is going to be a lot more complicated and probably costly than I was anticipating. The same thing is true when we think about meeting students. Our ministry is to the students and faculty, all students and faculty in the university. But, and this is the part that's really important, our ministry comes through those students who are apostolically gifted. And so we win at NSO not just when we go super broad, but when we are able to identify the apostolic talent in the communities around us. Does your NSO plan have a clear picture of the kinds of talents and gifts that you're looking for as you interact with crowds of students at proxy stations and ice cream socials and games and events, other things you're doing? Can you recognize in the crowds of students watching them interact the difference between a leader and a first follower? Both are critically important, but it's helpful for us to know, what are we looking at? Can you identify somebody who has an evangelistic gift or an evangelistic orientation that just isn't fully developed yet? Are you sensitive enough so that you can see apostolic gifts in people who are male and female, who are Latino and Chinese and Korean and African American and Black and all different ethnic communities that are on our campuses? Can we recognize apostolic gifts across the spectrum of the students that we're interacting with? You know, I was at a picnic at my daughter's school when I saw a move of apostolic genius. There was an Asian American man I didn't know. His son was there. He was there with his son. He took out a ball and some cones and set up this little kickball field. And at first it was just him and his son kicking the ball back and forth in this little kickball field that they'd set up. And after they'd kicked the ball around for a little while, he kind of invited somebody else to join them. And then he invited somebody else, and then that person invited somebody else, and before you know it, there was this incredible, fathers and sons and daughters and whole kickball game that was just sort of happening and in full swing. And as soon as that kickball game kind of launched and had momentum, this person who had actually started it disengaged himself from playing. His son still played, but he disengaged from playing so that he could come alongside the people who were waiting for their turn to kick the ball or do different things, and he could build relationship with them, and he could talk to them, and he could get to know them, and he could encourage them. I found out later that this particular person was a successful church planter, and as I was reflecting on it, I think, it never would have occurred to me to bring a kickball, set up a kickball game in the middle of a picnic as a way to build relationships and momentum and create an opportunity. And yet here was this evidence of apostolic genius that was on display if you had eyes to see it. We win at NSO when we've scouted the most apostolic, the most evangelistic people, the most people-smart people, the most spiritually vital people, and students and faculty, and help them catch a vision for what God is doing on campus and how they can be a part of God's movement with us. Now, third, we win at NSO when we spread the net wide, when we scout the apostolic vision, but finally, we win at NSO when we stimulate the spiritually curious. We win at NSO when we're connected to those who are seeking and those who are curious about life with God. Thousands of students on our campus are spiritually curious. And the gospel is beautiful and powerful. And we win at NSO when students and faculty are struck by the beauty and the wonder and the glory and the power of the gospel. A number of years ago, I was at an NSO prayer meeting and with students, when God began to stir faith for us to pray for conversions during NSO. The year before, our area had 25 conversions total that whole year, but God began to stir in our community as we prayed faith to believe that 30 students could come to faith just in the month of September alone. And so we began to pray for that. And by the 1st of September, we'd seen one person come to faith. And by the 5th of September, we saw 5 people come to faith. And by the 10th, we'd seen 10. And the fact that we were praying in faith, it changed how we did NSO. Because we had to ask more people, would you like to become a follower of Jesus today? It changed how we were talking to each other about connecting with spiritually curious people. It changed our sense of expectation of what God was going to do as we set out to meet students and help them connect with our ministry. By the end of that year, by the end of that month rather, September that year, we'd seen 35 students come to faith, and it changed our evangelistic temperature in the region for years to come. See, we win at NSO when the spiritually curious take steps towards Jesus. So how do you win at NSO? You spread the net wide. You scout the best possible apostolic talent, and you stimulate the spiritually curious. And if when we do that, our new student outreach efforts aren't done until we can confidently celebrate these wins to the glory of God and for the sake of the university. God bless you as you pour yourself out in NSO this season.